In the last episode, I asked you to send me projects when it came to building a C# calculator, which is going to be the first project we're going to do in this course here. And I have gotten quite a few different submissions. I did actually handpick 4 of them to show off in this video here. So as you can see, I do actually have the first one in front of me here. And we're just sort of going to dig into it and see how people actually decided to make this. I took a quick glance over some different projects, and I do want to say it was very fun to see how different solutions people came up with. Now looking at this project here, which is the first one, I'm not going to say the names of the people who sent it to me unless they actually write it inside the actual project, which I know some of them did. But as you can see, we do actually have a calculator. If we were to actually run this one before we actually do anything, we can actually go ahead and test this one out. So let's go ahead and do that. Control F5. And as you can see, we do have what looks identical to what I showed inside my demo last time. So if we were to go ahead and take and do a calculation, we're going to do plus, choose the first number, let's say 2, second number, let's say 4, and then you can see we get the answer, which is 6. So this is a very good example of doing the exact same thing as I did in the previous episode where I showed off my demo. So this is a really good project to submit, since it does what I did actually ask for the project to actually do as its completion requirements. So taking a look at this one, you can actually see we have 2 files. We have a program.cs and we have a calculator.cs. Inside the calculator.cs file, we have 4 different methods, which each does one of the different types of operations that we want them to do. So we have one for adding, one for subtracting, we have one for multiplication and division. So these methods are getting referred to once we do actually need to use these for actually doing something inside our main method in here. Now, if I were to talk about every single line of code in these projects, this is going to be a very long video. So we're just going to talk about the general idea that people did as a concept when they created their calculators. So as you can see, we started out by declaring the variables, or the person who created this actually started by declaring the variables. And this is actually a very good thing to do, because if you were to declare variables all over your method, like if you were to dive a little bit deeper down into the actual method, then you have a hard time actually finding the variables when you need to change them, if you need to change them later on. So declaring them all at the beginning is something that is highly recommended you do if you know which variables you're going to be using inside your methods. So he declared his variables here. We have a little bit about restarting the calculator, getting the numbers, putting what you call different operations inside a array, which is good to do. And then I just noticed here that he actually decided to go with a do-while loop, which is going to do whatever is inside this curly bracket pair that is down here, wrapping around all of his code almost. And then at the end, he restarts if the restart calculator variable is set to yes. We're basically doing a loop here, looping the entire code over and over again if a certain condition has been met, which is the restart calculator up here that is set to no. So we're doing everything inside loop. That's a fun way to do it. Now, as you can see, this guy really likes his loops inside his application. There's do while loops, and inside of here we have more while loops. So there's a lot of different loops in this application here, which is not a bad thing, because loops is a great way to solve a lot of different issues. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, which I didn't point out in the previous episode, is when you want to parse something inside C#, you need to do a check to check whether or not what you're trying to parse is actually parserable. And this guy decided to use one of the arrow handlers for parsing, which is also the one that I used in my project, which is the try parse, which essentially goes in and gives you a boolean to check whether or not this is actually parsing or if it isn't parsing. So this is something here that you need to think about when you want to parse something using C#. Now, another thing I noticed about this project specifically is that when he goes up here and parses it using the try parse method, he actually goes ahead and stores his parsing data inside a variable called n, which is right here. That's what we're actually doing here. We're outputting it into a new integer variable type, which is called n. And he doesn't use it anywhere. He actually goes down here and declares another variable, or actually takes one of the already declared variables and sets it equal to whatever his parsing actually outputs. So he actually checks for the parsing up here, and then he parses it a second time, where you could probably have rewritten this a little bit just to spit it directly out into a variable. in order to use it directly so you don't have to do it twice. And as we continue down, I can see there's more parsing methods, which of course needs to be used because otherwise it's not going to work out the way you want it to. If you make an error, it's not going to work out the way you want it to. And then at the end here, you can see that he actually goes ahead and actually performs the type of calculation that he wants to actually do. Now, one thing I just quickly noticed here going down here is that he does actually call on the method that he has inside his calculator file. But one thing I would probably change here is not to write out and repeat these lines of code over and over again inside every single if statement or else if statement. I will probably do that at the end afterwards, because you save a couple of different lines of code and you sort of minimizes your application with not having repeated code inside the application. But besides that, I think this project looks really great. Okay, so besides that, let's go ahead and look at the next project. Now, in this next project here, I did actually notice that there's no calculator file. We have one single file, which is the one that has the main method in it. Let's just go ahead and check whether or not there are more methods inside this file, or if it's just the main method. Okay, so it is just the main method, which is also a way you can solve this issue, because a calculator isn't really that big of a project. So you could probably just do it using your main method without having any issues just with this small project here. So taking a look at what he actually did here, we can actually see that he tried to create some interface, which is great, because now we can actually see something visually inside the calculator. Let's actually see how this looks like if we do actually run it, because we do have some design aspects to this application, which I think is great. So we have the calculator over here on the side, and then it actually asked us to click 1 through 6 in order to perform different types of operations. He actually added in quite a few more operations than I did in my demo. So this is something that can do more than mine can, which is great, I think. So let's go ahead and choose one of these different ones. We can actually go ahead and just say we want to do division. Let's go ahead and choose a number. So it asks for number 1. We can say 5 times, let's say 6. And then we get an answer. So the quotient of 5 and 6 is, did I not choose? So from the looks of it, it actually works really great when it comes to division. Probably also works really great when it comes to multiplication. I thought I chose multiplication, but as I can tell inside what was written here, it was a mistake on my end. That's what we in the professional world called an error 40, because it happens 40 centimeters away from the screen. So looking at this, it actually looks really great. We can't restart the application, I just noticed, but we can just close it down, which is fine. Don't have to be able to restart it. So looking at what he actually did in here, you can see that we started out by writing out the different lines that comes to, sort of shape the interface. Then he went to do a parsing, and this is actually the parsing done the exact way as I taught it. So again, no minus points there, because that's what I taught to do. Later on, we will go ahead and talk more about how to actually check parsing methods to see whether or not they actually parse correctly. But this is what I taught to do, so this is what I approve as a correct answer. So having followed my lessons, this is exactly the way that he should have been doing it. Then afterwards, we go ahead and do a bunch of if and else statements, which is going to check for certain data. And then depending on the data, let's say if you chose addition, it is going to go ahead and actually run the calculation and then spit it out inside a right line, which is what we saw inside the console. And I think that the way it looks from it, we also have one for subtraction, multiplication, division, square root, raised to, so the power of, I guess. It's been quite a while since I had math, so that might have been the power of. Might be wrong there. And then making sure the user doesn't screw it up. We do actually have something else down here. Now I did notice that if you were to actually screw it up, I think it just closes down again. Let's actually go and double check that. So if I were to screw something up, you can see it actually throws me an error. So here it would actually be great to do an error handler that sort of catches this one. If we were to go ahead and start it up again and do a wrong sort of mistake when it comes to using the numbers, let's go ahead and choose this time multiplication, because now I actually chose correctly. Then we're going to go and choose something random. And again, it sort of throws me an error. So here it would be a good idea to do error handling to sort of catch the error and give the user something he could actually use inside the console application. This would actually be breaking the application. So error handling is always important, just like in any other sort of programming language. But besides that, it works pretty great when it comes to actually typing in the correct info. So let's talk about the next project. Let's go and open this one up. I do actually have all the different projects open here, so we're just going to go and check this next one. So if you go and take a look at what this person did inside his files here, you can actually see we have program.cs, which is the main file that has the main method. There's quite a lot of code in here, I noticed. Whereas if we were to go inside the calculator file, we also have a bit of code, and these mostly goes in and, let's see, this one runs the calculation. This one goes in and gets the calculation type. This one gets the calculation number, and this one actually calculates. Now, one thing I noticed here, which is something I also did in my application, is that the person reuses the getCalc number from the looks of it. That means that he actually takes the same method and reuses it both times when the user have to type in their two numbers. So that is something that is a really good idea to do, because you reuse your code so you don't have to write it again and again and again every single time you want to do the same operation. So the reusability of code is one of the main features when it comes to object-oriented programming, which is what C# is. So if we are to take a look at the main file here, we can actually see we have a start method, which I do think is from experience in Unity, because a lot of C# developers do actually have experience in Unity. He does actually write it here. It says here that he has a bit of experience when it comes to Unity. The start method in Unity is basically what runs at the start when you call on the script. So you don't really need to have that in here inside a console project, but it is fun to see that people have experiences coming from different places. So having a start method is kind of fun to see. So what we have here is we have different types of methods. We do actually have a main method. Then we have a second method called calc. Then if we were to go down, you can probably see whether or not we're going to have even more methods. I don't think we do. It's a really long method, this one. Okay, so we do have some more ones at the end here. Each of them are going to do different types of calculations. So one might minus, one subtracts, some does different things. There's also a help option, which is kind of nice to see. A method that gets called on in order to actually help the user out. One thing I do notice here is that there's a lot of different repetitions of doing a case switch, we call it, which is where you do, it's basically a replacement for an if-else statement. You can use a switch instead. There's a lot of the same ones being done here. So you have multiplications done multiple times. So there might be a different solution there to sort of shorten the code a little bit. I haven't looked too deep into the code here, but there's probably some way to sort of shorten it. But other than that, it looks really great. Did I actually try to run this one? I don't think I did. So let's actually go and run it, see how it actually looks like. Welcome, follow the instruction for calculate or write exit to close the program. I like that. It's like having an actual person telling you what to do. It's actually written in like how a human would actually say it. Or maybe just a very robotic human, I don't know. But we do actually have some instructions here, which is something that is really great for user friendliness, because the user has to be able to use your software. So if we were to go ahead and specify a operation, let's actually go ahead and choose multiply. Specify the first term. I like that word, term. Very technical. The second term. And then we get 25. Specify operation, so restarts again now, which is also a feature I think is great to have. Now, if I want to exit, it's kind of fun to see that he's not allowing you to exit with a double tap, but you do have to actually write exit, which I think is great. Is it possible to write help? No, it is not. But let's just go and exit the application here. It would have been fun if you could have written help. Oh, it's not. Oh, it's still doing terms. Okay, so it's helping out now because I made an error. So that's actually an example of an error handler. I'm completely messing up the console application here. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this one down. Works great from what I can tell. And I think we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next project. Now, before we open this one up, I do want to say that this one was the one that impressed me the most visually. Because visually, this guy has done a lot to actually make the calculator very impressive. And also he made some fun stuff inside the code, which I kind of like. So when it comes to this specific program, you'll notice that he included a lot of these visual elements I'm talking about, which is something we haven't talked about yet, but it's something we will talk about in the future at some point. At least if we had to talk about console applications, this is a way for you to actually do that. So this person actually wrote his name in here. Caesar from Arabia made this one. So if we were to go down to the bottom, I just want to show this one really quick. You can see that he wrote the end with fire going on. So taking a look at this main file, you can actually see that this is another example of doing everything inside one project file. So instead of splitting it up into different classes, we do everything inside one class, which again, like I said, when it comes to a small project, doesn't really matter that much. But it would have been nice to see a little bit of splitting into different classes, just for order's sake. So taking a look at it here, you can actually see that we're not inside the main method to start with. We do actually have a self-created method called initialize. And I guess this one is being called on when we do actually initialize the actual calculation, because I do see a little bit of operations going on down here. We also have some variables that has been declared at the top. That's good to see. So going down, you can see we have one for the different types of, calculation operations they want to perform. You see a lot of these types of lines of code. Essentially what he's doing there is he's actually coloring in the actual thing to see inside the console. So if we were to take something like background color, that would actually change the background color of some of the elements in there. The foreground color changes the color of the text inside the console application. So this will be a yellow background with a black font color. So we're to go a little bit down, just to go past this one, you can see we now have some calculation methods. So he also split his different calculation methods into different methods. That's a good idea to do, because if you want to make changes to your methods when it comes to the individual calculations at some point in the future, it is good to have them in different methods, because then you can just go in and change them individually without having to change a major method inside your project. So going further down, you can now see we have the class called program. So I just noticed here something I completely missed at the beginning is that he actually created a separate class. He does actually have a class for when it comes to doing calculations, but it's inside the same file. So we do have a program file that has a class called initialize, not a method. I don't remember if I said that, but if I said method, it's a class. And if we were to go further down, you can actually see that he has his other class called main, which is the one that we're using in order to start up the application. Now, I would probably have divided these into different files, because having many classes in one file is something that's not really recommended to do. I can see why he kind of would do this, because people talk about having one namespace and then having, different classes that belongs under the namespace. And then you would think, okay, let's put all the classes inside one file. Whereas it is actually a good idea to have a specific namespace created inside your project by actually creating with something like calc, and then inserting all the different classes individually as individual files inside this namespace you created, which is one of the folders you create inside your project. So having everything inside one file is something that makes it a little bit heavy to look at. It's not going to do anything wrong with the application. It's just, visually, if you have to go through the code again, it's a little bit heavy to look at. Then you can see inside the main method, he's actually starting it up. And we have a lot of different flashiness going on. This guy has had fun making this application, I can tell. And that's what I like the most about it. So we have a lot of different things going on, a lot of different coloring. His menu is actually echoing out, or what do you call printing out, what you can actually choose line by line by having fancy interface. If we go a little bit further down, you can see that we also have a while initialize is set to success, which I guess is checking whether or not we have started up that application correctly. It is going to go ahead and start. Let's see. It's kind of confusing looking at the things when we have a lot of interface coloring mixed in between. But as you can see, we're actually getting asked to input valid numbers, and he is actually parsing it the correct way too, the way that I didn't teach inside the previous lessons. So he is actually performing a Boolean check to see whether or not his parsing actually failed or succeeded. And if it does not succeed, he actually starts it over again. And this is a really smart way to do a while loop in order to redo a parsing method. And it's also the same method I do believe I used inside my project. We'll get to see it in just a second. So this is a really great way to do that and repeat it over and over again, so we don't have to write too much code. Going further down, you can actually see he included some beeps in here, which I actually haven't noticed. This means that when you actually continue in the application, it beeps to actually give you some kind of sound indicator that what you typed in has successfully been typed in or something. So that's kind of fun. We do a bit more parsing. This is the second number. If we go further down, we can also see that he actually writes out the numbers, I do believe, when we do actually do this. We'll test it in just a second. And then we actually initialize the operation. So we actually choose the operation to actually be performed here. And I do think I just noticed that, yeah, he has a different if statement for different types of operations. And here it would be a good idea to, since you have this much code inside an if statement, so maybe put it inside a different method for itself. Because if I have to find a specific, let's say, add something to multiply at some point inside my code, then it would be nice to have it as not part of the main method inside the file. Now let's actually go ahead and take a look at how this actually looks like inside the console, because I think it definitely looks like it's going to look really cool. So if we were to go ahead and open this one up, you can actually see that we actually get a bleep. I don't know if you heard that, but it did actually say bleep when I opened it up. So in here you can see we got some coloring. We have a menu, kind of fun. We can go and do something like, let's say, I like multiplying, but this time we'll do subtraction. So let's say we want to divide, not divide, subtract. I just said subtract, why do I click divide? I'm gonna do some subtraction. Then it beeps again, and then it gives me a subtraction method. So it actually repeats out what exactly I chose, which is what I thought it would do. So inside here, we'll input the first number, say 2. Hey, first number is 2. Then we'll subtract 1. And we do actually get the result in a different color. That's kind of fun to see. And then you can see it actually asks me whether or not I want to calculate again. He has done this in the way that you usually see it inside a terminal, which is Y or N for yes or no. You wouldn't usually type in the entire, yes or no. So here I could actually go and say Y. And then it starts over. It actually cleans up the console, which is also a command that you can do inside C#. One thing I didn't add into my demo last time. So this one is a little bit more advanced than mine. It can do a little bit more, and it definitely looks a lot cooler when it comes to the interface. So let's go and see how my project looks like. So taking a look at what I have here, I do actually have a program.cs file. If we were to go inside my calc namespace, you can see I have a calculator class. And I have these divided up, like I said, because you should have one calculator or one class inside one file. If you have many different classes that goes under the calculator namespace, put them in different files because it looks a lot better when it comes to just organizing your project. So what you'll actually notice here is when I go inside my main file, this is what I have. And the reason I did it this way is because you don't want to cram too much inside the main file. Instead, what you want to do, at least in my head, I think this is how you should do it, is you're going to go ahead and just run a method when you want to run a calculation. And the reason I did this is because right now we're just doing a basic calculator. If you were to do something a lot bigger, a lot grander, a large project, then if you perform all of your main functionalities inside the main method, it's going to be quite large. So you don't want to do many things inside the main method. Try and do as many things as you can away from them inside the different classes that you created. And that's a general thing that I noticed that people did inside their project, which isn't a mistake, but just something that you should think about in the future, which is to use your classes that is not the main method, or at least the class that the main method belongs to. Try to keep that as clean as possible and actually use the classes and the namespaces besides the main one for different operations. So what you notice inside my project, just to go over it really quick, is that I have a run calculation method that essentially takes care of the whole running process of running the actual, the actual console application. So when we start it up and we want to do something, I can actually just run this one method and it will actually repeat itself. So once I'm done with the actual console application, I already calculated something and I want to restart it, I just need to run my main method here again, and then everything restarts, which is a really easy way to just simply restart something as simple as a calculator. So in here, I also go and declare things as an array in order to do the different types of operations. I also declare all my variables because it's a good habit to do that at the start of the actual file. And then we go down, grab the operator type, get the first number, the second number, we run the calculator, write the answer out, and then we check whether or not to restart. This is all the code that I have in order to perform my calculation inside this main method here. And again, like I said, you want to take the different functionalities and split them up into different methods or functions or whatever programming language you might be using. It's like that in all the different programming languages. You want to make sure that when you do actually do something, that each little task that you have gets split up into a different method, because it's much cleaner just to call on a method than it is to have everything inside one method. So if we take a look at again what I have here, you'll actually notice that if I were to go ahead and go down past this method that actually runs the calculation, then you can see that we have a getCalc type, which is a method that simply gets the type of calculation or the operator type. Then I return it into the above method that I just showed you. If I go further down, you can say I have a getCalcNum method, simply gets the number, and of course goes in and checks whether or not it's been parsed correctly. If it does not, I run a while loop that simply goes in and asks the user again, because he wrote something wrong, to repeat a different number. Very, very simple and small method we have here. And again, I call on the same method twice, each time I want to get a number. If we were to go down, you can see we actually have the calculate method. This one goes in and actually calculates what has to be calculated, and then goes ahead and returns that result inside the first method we have on top of here. Now, I do want to point one thing out that I should have changed when it comes to my application, which is, like I said, each operator type, like adding, subtracting, multiply, divide, should have been put inside different methods as well. Because if I want to make something really advanced later on when it comes to this application, it is a good idea to have them in separate methods so you don't screw anything up. If I want to add something to, let's say, my addition operation. So it is better to have these in different methods for a cleaner look. Because this is a very small project, just a calculator, I had the same mindset of just sort of do the easy solution, which is just to include it in here directly inside this method. So all the different operations are just simply getting done here directly. So going back up to the top inside my run calculation, you can see once we reach the bottom, I just simply go ahead and check whether or not the person wants to restart the application. If he does not want to restart it, then we just exit it. So with all this said, it was really fun to see all the different solutions actually getting sent to me. It's fun to see that every single person had a different take on how to actually solve this issue. There's actually sort of a saying inside the programming world, which is that if you give 10 programmers the same project, they will all give you 10 different solutions to it. So again, this is a spot-on example of how that actually happened. So a few things that I want to sort of have you take away from this little project here is make sure that you divide things up properly by organizing your project. Make sure you use the classes, split them up into classes. Make sure you split them up by having different classes in different files, because if you add multiple classes in one file, it's going to start looking messy. Make sure you use methods, because methods are there to make your life a lot easier when it comes to splitting up the different tasks, and to make sure that you don't have to repeat certain operations again and again and again. Because if it were to just make all the code inside the main method, then you would have to retype the code if you had to repeat some part of the code, which I saw a few times in these projects here. So make sure you split things up into methods if it's something that can be done using a method. And also make sure that you actually go ahead and check for error handling. I saw one project here that did do an awesome job on actually creating the calculator, but there's a little bit of lack of an error handler in there. So that's also an important thing, because when you make a product when it comes to making any sort of application, whether it being a website or a console application or a game or something, you want to make sure that the users can't screw up your application and break it. So it's very important that you also check for that sort of thing. But besides that, it was a lot of fun to see the different projects, and I'm really happy I actually got so many submissions. So thank you guys for sending this in so I could talk about it. It is sort of a weird thing probably to have your projects shown publicly on a YouTube channel. So it is something I'm happy that people were willing to send in to me so I could actually show it off. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.